And CEO of AGT Agro, one of the biggest food industries in Canada, and we are very glad to welcome him to India and to be able to discuss partnerships in the agri-tech sector. We are looking forward to this discussion, which will be on bilateral investment opportunities, and it's a follow-up on a closed-door agri roundtable discussion which was conducted earlier this morning. Over to you, Murad and Mr. Harish.
My name is Murad Katib. I'm President and CEO of AGT Food and Ingredients in Canada, and I'm also on the board of Invest in Canada and on the board of the Protein Supercluster. So I think we're going to talk a bit about agriculture and the opportunity for collaboration between India and Canada in the agriculture sector. I just wanted to start by saying that the agriculture relationship between Canada and India is really quite deep. It's forming about 30% of the total trade activity between the two countries, and one that has great opportunity to continue to grow in terms of both breadth and depth. And I think that the Canadian-India trade relationship has really been one that has been based in agriculture on pulses, so lentils and peas and chickpeas being the three main items. But when I look at the opportunity ahead, we're really natural partners. As the global demand for protein, becomes a paramount consideration both for food security and also for an ability for each country to supply the growing demand for protein in a manner which suits available water and available land. So when I look at the urbanization in India, I look at the reliance on monsoon rain collection, and I look at the agricultural policy to boost farm incomes, I don't see these initiatives being at odds with a much deeper relationship with Canada. We have very strong land base, we have availability of fresh water, we have scale of agriculture, and we have a technology and innovation sector, in particular that is, really moving towards traceable, safe, sustainable production of vegetable protein. And I think these are all very consistent, trends that are going to be very much resonating in India. And as we look at the development here, certainly self-sufficiency in agriculture is a desired goal or outcome. But the path to that is really a modernization of the agriculture sector, and one where I think there's great opportunity for Canada and India, both on a bilateral trade and a bilateral investment track to dramatically increase the ties between the two countries.
Yeah, thank you, Murad. I think my name is Harish. I'm Additional Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. I've been a former ambassador to Vietnam and Consul General in Houston. Broadly, I think as far as India is concerned, agriculture is a very important sector. It contributes about 16% to our national GDP and employs over 50% of the people in the country. But there are issues of productivity, and there are issues of farm incomes. Our Prime Minister has announced a national plan to relook at the whole sector so that our farmers' incomes are doubled by the year 2022. And this is where we see the possibility for a significant revamp in the agricultural sector. In terms of aggregates, we are ahead, for example, in terms of milk production in the world. In terms of aggregates, if you're looking at rice production, we are top in the world. But in terms of productivity figures per hectare, I think we have much catching up to do. Likewise, there are significant issues in terms of diversification. We need to have more farmers move away from paddy and wheat cultivation to look at new opportunities in fruit and vegetable. There are issues of storage, and we need good storage facilities built across the country. So that we can also prevent wastage of food. There are issues of building the necessary infrastructure across the country. And I think in each one of this, we have much to learn in our cooperation with Canada. You have raised a significant point too, Murad, in terms of plant-based protein. And I think as the largest concentration of vegetarians in the world, this is a natural market for India to be in terms of new products, acceptable products of plant-based protein for the Indian market. But it's also an opportunity for us to move significantly faster into developing the agro-processing industry, which can not only look at churning out plant-based protein products for the Indian market, and of course we have various cuisines, we have different tastes across the country, different eating habits. So how do you meet the plant-based protein requirements of such a varied taste across the length and breadth of the country? But we look at it as a significant investment opportunity for Canadian business to develop the capacities in terms of meeting the demands of the domestic industry and even for export.
Yeah, I think that the demand for vegetable protein alternatives, both domestically and internationally, is going to see a skyrocketing growth. So, if we look at the vegetable protein-based, plant-based meat or the non-meat, opportunity that we see today, the market is around $5.5 billion today, and that is projected. When we look at the overall global demand, around 250 billion. The plant-based protein demand is projected to grow by 17% per annum. So when we look at that type of growth rate, this becomes a massive opportunity. And where we see an opportunity is for Canadian companies to invest in India. And then as these products and the production is developed, not only for the domestic market, but for export, we expect that there will be also Indian and Canadian joint ventures that will invest both here and also in Canada. Because we've been very, very successful in positioning Canada as a gateway to North America. And as a nation, we have a very strong focus on innovation. The Protein Supercluster is one of those initiatives. $153 million invested by our government, partnered with $250 million from the private sector, that is focused really on the entire innovation platform within the plant-based protein supply chain and value chain. And I think that, the strategy of India on raising incomes, as Prime Minister Harper said earlier today, the development of the agriculture sector in Canada was a deliberate roadmap of innovation and technology. And as Minister Harrison from Saskatchewan, my home province, mentioned, we have a target in our growth strategy in our province that we will increase our production to 45 million tons, by 2030. And if we look at, only 2 decades ago, we were running around 24 million tons. So to be able to double your agricultural output in 25 years, with the same land base, is really the utilization of technology, diversification, and modernization. I think that the technology side, goes beyond just research, the development of innovation. It also goes into post-harvest storage. So, there's a tremendous opportunity, and we're seeing, as a Fairfax company, our investments in NCML, have been, very important in terms of Canada's ability to bring new technologies. The construction of silos for the Ministry of Food that is going on currently. Our Canadian, technologies and expertise in the establishment of grain silos and storage systems. And when I, look at the overall landscape of, both imports and then the local operations of agencies like NAFED and the Ministry of Agriculture, a modern collection infrastructure is necessary because the farm size is small. And as we get into higher value crops that are more perishable, today we don't have the infrastructure in this country to deal with it. But I think that, the farm income rising and the target by government can be achieved not only through more production, but even more impactful is more value. So the rationalization of acreage and the moving into higher value crops is a very important part of that modernization.
I think that's a very valid point. I think part of the focus is to enhance productivity of the farm. Second is to move away to products that can really add more value. So we need a whole production chain in terms of agri-industry, agro-processing, which can add more value closer to the farm. And the way we look at is when new technologies come into the agri sector, when new ways of farming are brought into the agri sector, I think the farmer is empowered to move away from the traditional crops that they have been growing. And here there is a new interest, for example, in local crops like millets, which have been neglected for quite some time, and there has been a preference for growing rice and wheat in many parts of the country. These are very hardy crops which do not require a lot of water and which are more suitable to the agroclimatic zones where they are being grown, which don't deplete groundwater resources to the same extent, and which have much higher nutritional value. The whole effort, in addition to empowering the farmer and enhancing farm incomes, is also to ensure a more balanced nutritional intake by the vast majority of Indians, so that issues of wasting or stunting in parts of the country can also be addressed. So I think the focus on plant protein would fit into this overall policy framework of enhancing farmer incomes and for addressing non-balanced nutritional intake in parts of the country that may have resulted in instances of wasting and stunting in parts of the country.
Yeah, I mean, very, very good point. I think that, from a policy perspective, for populations that have a protein deficiency, initiatives to boost the consumption of high protein, high fiber, natural micronutrient dense pulses, for instance, is a very impactful initiative, and one that I think will serve a lot of objectives of the nation as it continues to modernize its sector. And then I want to move to the income the income thresholds that continue to move up, so the rising middle class in India. And we have to recognize as well that the value-added sector is truly a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for this country, and one where when we look at the traditional consumer and the youth population of India being such a high concentration on the demographic scale, the consumption of just a traditional rice and dal is not really necessarily as favorable to the young population. And so alternative formats for the delivery of vegetable protein nutrition for a changing demographic and changing income profile for this country is a necessary part of modernization. And I sometimes characterize it as what I call the telecommunications effect in food. I remember the first time I came to India, to many years ago, to wait for a phone, in India was years of wait. And then within 1 year, everybody had a cell phone. And within 2 years, everybody had 2 cell phones. The food sector is going to go through this type of transformation, where today we're lacking an organized retail market. With the advent of technology and digital, there are a number of large groups in India that are now planning digital initiatives, cash and carry, organization of local markets on staple foods, branded food products that are going to be able to be ordered from smartphones and are going to be picked up at local markets. Right? There's an ability to deliver extruded protein products in snack foods, noodles, pasta. We're producing a rice substitute made from yellow peas and lentils. It's an extruded protein concentrate, natural, that looks like rice, cooks like rice, but it's 14% protein. So this is the future of food. And I think that the collaboration between Canada and India can really take the arable land and water resources and technology of Canada, the demand profile and local production of India, and truly create a two handed strategy that really can't be matched by any two countries in the world getting together.
True. I think that's a very valid point you make, and we can see it. Though we are known more as a nation of vegetarians, increasingly with increasing incomes, the proportion of the population who are non-vegetarian is going up over the decades. So today, for example, less than a third of the country are vegetarians. And part of this is explained by the fact that with higher incomes, people would like to consume animal-based protein. But again, for a country of our size, is it environmentally sustainable that a majority of the country becomes non-vegetarian and are dependent on animal-based protein? What are the carbon footprints and the environmental costs of such a transformation of food taste? But again, as you said, you can't ask people to limit themselves to rice and dal. So then probably the answer lies in delivery of plant-based protein in newer forms, in newer acceptable forms, based on the regional cuisines of the country across the length and breadth of the country. And that is something which is a huge business opportunity. Coupled with the digital revolution and access to the internet and the low cost of data, the growth of startups, and increasingly the growth of agri-startups and agro-industry startups, I think you're probably right that the kind of revolution you saw in telecom may just be about to happen in the case of the food industry.
Yeah. I think that the mega trend of rising income and population growth together, and this desire for new formats, I think, is going to be a very exciting food revolution. And it's one where, again, when we look at the core strengths of India and Canada and we couple them together, there's very little downsides. I'm a very strong advocate of a strategy between the two countries. And one where we go beyond just a traditional, bilateral trade relationship, and we really look at a bilateral strategy for the development of the vegetable protein, business. So, certainly we're going to be one of the advocates of that, and along with others. I think that also we also have to ensure that we have the scientific and the educational side tied into this as well. So, there's a very strong ability on the research side, exchange of students, exchange of knowledge, that will truly go a long way towards that relationship as well.
Murad, one issue I just wanted to say that Indians are vegetarians, they are not vegans. So dairy continues to play a very important part in Indian diet. And this is another great area of opportunity for cooperation between India and Canada. The need to modernize the dairy sector for bringing in new forms of industrial collaboration, for upgrading technology, for upgrading genetic pools where feasible. I think these are again investment opportunities and cooperation opportunities between the two countries. The academia and the university systems between the two countries, now that we have so many of our students who are not only currently studying but have studied and are products of Canadian universities, over 1 million of them over the years. And that's a huge talent pool who have graduated partly from India, partly from Canada. They can act as a huge bridge. It's important to get the R&D community of both countries together so that the cooperation in agriculture also extends to the dairy industry, and that is seen as an integral part of our overall agricultural cooperation.
I think that very well said that the totality of the relationship is trade, two-way bilateral investments, and then also knowledge and technology. And I think that we are certainly at the embryonic stage of the relationship, and there's a deep trade relationship that already exists. I think that's going to continue to grow, but I'm certainly looking very forward to the growth of the totality of that relationship.